I actually lived with my grandparents for a while, transitionary, before I skipped town. And there was that feeling of like, oh, should I stay or should I go? Grandma loves me so much.
Hello everybody, and happy Flare! Sean and Raj are here. And my name is Phil.
Hello.
We've got Jump Darling today, which is a Canadian drama, written and directed by Phil Connell, and it stars Cloris Leachman, who I didn't actually know until obviously the end of the credits rolled, that she died this year in January. So there's a little tribute to her at the end. Yeah, she was 94. She's incredible. I didn't realise that she was in her 90s. But she plays Margaret. Thomas Duplessie, who is a TV and theatre actor, he plays Russell, who's a drag queen reeling from a breakup.
I will warn the viewers and listeners that all these films might just bleed into one film in my head today.
So you've seen four today.
But it really tells the story of, and I'm going to get the names right because these are live. So it follows the story of Russell and his alter ego, Fishy Falters. And really it tells the story of someone returning back to their life in rural Ontario, and what that means, and hanging out with his grandmother, and the interesting story between a grandmother, her daughter, and her son, in that order. And I think it's really quite a lovely movie. But that's how I'll frame it. I think it is a return to home for someone after big ideas and big dreams.
I've got a funny feeling that I didn't like it as much as you two did. Not that I have a problem with low-budget films. It felt quite low budget until the soundtrack kicked in. There were 4 songs, so I thought, wow. So that's where the money's gone, because there was Robin, and he performed my favourite Robin track, Indestructible, which was just the most amazing part of this movie for me, because it was so well done. And there was London Grammar, which one of the competitor queens performed. There was also Scissor Sisters.
Yeah, it was a great soundtrack.
Yes,
I made a note of that because it really kind of blew me away. And it's a bit of Years and Years chucked in at the start.
Yeah.
There's an LAX moment too, which you can't ignore as well. So
right. Of course.
Yeah. Really
Canada's most loved lady.
But it did feel like a TV movie to me, and I mean, I've got nothing against low budget films. I just think obviously it's how it's done.
I don't know. I thought this film was really cute. I think if you're a gay man who's always had a really good relationship with your grandma or grandmas, in my case, both of them. It sort of hits at a certain heartstring that you don't see in too many LGBTQ movies. So I really enjoy that. There was a couple times I just cried a little bit because it was just cute, their interactions. And, my grandma was just as snappy and a little bit bitchy and curt like Cloris Leachman's grandma. So I quite enjoyed that. And just I'll never forget, like in my coming out experience, for some reason grandmas get it. Like they're just like, they fully accept when their grandsons are gay, at least for the most part. Or at least that's what my experience was. So for me, it kind of hit close to home, that she was like, I don't remember his name, but I remember him. That sort of a funny moment. And I don't know, it just got me thinking too, like, how she was so hesitant about moving into the care home that the mom wanted to put her in. And it just got me thinking, I'm like, man, when I get that old, I want to be in a care home. Everyone just leaves you alone, do what you want to do, decorate the room the way you want. It's like, that's kind of cool. It just got me thinking about being in a care home as an older
Raj,
person.
I'll be next door to you in that gay care home playing Kylie
Exactly.
songs.
How much fun would that be? And then, we watched Mama Gloria right afterwards. And I'm like, that's just the life. Sign me up. So I don't know. There was a few different emotions going on with me watching the film, but mostly it was about, that grandma's special relationship. And it made me think of the story too. There's an actor and musician, a gay actor and musician, whose next door neighbor was an elderly neighbor. And he took her on like a grandma as well. And I don't know, it's just, I kind of like the stories that can come out of our generation, teaming up with the older generation and being there to lean on each other. So I don't know. I think I liked it for that.
Do you know what it reminded me of, Raj? Do you remember we saw that film Stage Mother?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
reminded me of that, the feel of it. And almost the lines as well felt like it was the writer's lines and not the characters, if that makes sense. It's like some of the things that Grandma said. I guess some grandmas would be like that, but it just felt like it was the writer saying the lines and not her.
Oh, some grandmas are that and so much more, Phil. So I don't think you're wrong there when you say it's probably the writer's lines. It's probably a lived experience. So, and that to me is why it felt a little authentic. There was a couple plot points. I'm like, do we really need that? Like, the guy he was interested in having a straight girlfriend. Did we really need that plot line? No. That could have been cut out for me, but overall, I think it kind of worked.
Well, it's like when Russell said, "Oh, I've got this job as a DJ," and his mother said, "You mean as a disc jockey?" It's like, to me, that just threw me out. I felt really jarring. It's like nobody would really say that. It just felt a bit too try hard.
But your sort of uneducated mother might. So I mean, you could be a waiter, and a mother would be like, "So what exactly do you do?" Like, just...
For me, there was bits that reminded me of AJ and the Queen. Some of those things that you were dropping, like that, was the kind of cringe-worthy script. Not a fan, but I did find the relationship. The thing that I think kept me in that film was the relationship between Cloris Leachman and her grandson. And I do think there's an interesting piece here where, like, he had the hopes and dreams of that town in some ways, because everyone kind of says, "Oh, you were going to go off and become this big actor," right? And he goes off, it doesn't work. He's almost ashamed that drag is his art form, and he kind of hides behind it. And then he has to come back to his hometown in Ontario with his tail between his legs, a bit like, "I didn't make it." And in some ways, that's where the story begins, and he begins this new life. And as an actor, it's all about telling stories. And when he realizes his grandmother's story, that is almost the start of this new character. It's almost his rebirth at the end of the film. So that's the bit that I really liked. I find it interesting that Cloris Leachman's character was this kind of like big, Columbia graduate, corporate high flyer, and then his mother's kind of into this like star signs and astrology. It's a classic thing, right? And I think he's the product of those two women, which is what I really liked about it. But there were a lot of kind of tropes in there that weren't needed, and they could have really skinned it out. And there were some really lovely touches that they could have played on more. But I enjoyed it.
Can we talk about the owner of Peckers, which was the club? He met Russell in the toilet of all places, and there's the other thing where somebody comes through the door as well and gives him the look up and down. And so we don't need that. Okay, we know that does happen, but it's almost like a cliche. It's like it's set in a gay club or a gay bar, and you've got queens walking into the toilet and just doing that. It's like, I just feel that's quite a dated thing, because it doesn't need explaining. I think a lot of the things in this movie were over-explained when they didn't need to be. It's almost like they were maybe appealing to a different audience. But the guy from Peckers, I mean, do you know what I mean?
My thought, though, Phil. I think that's giving my thought, which is I think it is targeted at a wider audience. Yeah. So it over-explains a little, which I guess it depends kind of what the audience you're targeting. I think what was interesting for those with a really beady eye, they would have noticed that on stage at Peckers was Ty Naomi Banks from Canada Drag Race.
Yes.
No, yeah, I think it was laboured in parts, but I think the story generally was quite a nice story, and I liked the interaction. I mean, Cloris Leachman, she's done everything. She did Young Frankenstein. More recently, she played Varya in American Gods. So I mean, she's an incredible, and I think the fact that this was her last movie at 94 makes it more poignant. It does make it more interesting, and as her last piece of cinema, really.
See, that felt really poignant to me. Yeah, and the way that the film ended as well, I thought that was beautifully done. But yeah, and maybe I've got a cold heart. I didn't feel the emotional pull, and I really wanted to feel that emotional pull, because obviously that's the subject matter. It's about different generations, isn't it? Coming together and bonding again. Agreed.
And I think for me, the takeaway from this really is around the wisdom of Cloris Leachman's character. The grandson's probably like, young, bopping around, thinking he knows everything. And she has such wisdom. And she can see that. It's like, as you say earlier, that relationship between grandmother and grandson. And I think that for me is the takeaway from this film, because there is a load of, like, as you say, tropes and cliches and stereotypes, but you can move those to one side, I think.
The scene where he's sort of leaving in the car and he kind of has that moment of, should I stay or should I go? And he, does the car around a couple times. Like, I've actually lived that moment because, as a young gay man, you just want to go out there and try to make it in the world. And, I actually lived with my grandparents for a while, transitionary, before I skipped town. And there was that feeling of like, oh, should I stay or should I go? Grandma loves me so much and I want to take care of her and she's so fabulous. But you have to go out and do what you do in the world. So I think like that scene at the end was really, I think, a lot of lived experience for some people.
So this is going to be interesting. Star rating for Jump Darling.
For me, it's a 4. Oh, I couldn't really find anything wrong with the film other than the straight girlfriend plot point, which I don't think was needed. But, for me, it was very much close to a lived experience. So that's why I'm giving it a 4. If I didn't relate to the film, I'd give it a 3.
I'm even get a 3, as I mentioned. I think it would make a great short, and that's not. I think it's actually got a. I think it's got a heart. This film. I think it tried to do too much at times, and I was really drawn to the relationship between Cloris Leachman and the grandson. So yeah, I liked it. It could have given more, but it was solid.
See, I didn't get that relationship at all, which was a real shame because I think for what it was and the story that it was, I wanted to feel that, and I felt a little bit frustrated that I didn't feel that. And I don't know whether that's because of the tropes and because of the over-explaining that kind of pulled me the other way. And Cloris Leachman, great, and obviously very, very poignant that it's, I think, maybe her last role, perhaps.
I think it is, yeah.
So, yeah, lots of plus points, but it's a 2 for me, unfortunately.
Wow, 3 different scores. Wow, I think that's a first.
I think, Raj, we're going to have a lot of that this Flare, because some of the films I've seen today have taken me in one direction or the other. I've been quite binary around some of the things I've seen today. This is probably the only one I'm right in the middle on.
This is going to be a great festival. I think there's going to be lots to talk about. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. We'll be back for another BFI Flare movie review soon. So make sure you join us. See you soon.